I have a lot of games. Far too many games, actually. Sitting inside of my Steam library is a slew of titles that I haven't finished, and even more that I haven't actually started. I've got gamer brain. I see a sale and I buy a product I don't even want because Sex Gym 3D is 35% off. It might never go this cheap again! As a result, I'm starting to feel a bit guilty when I buy or find games when I've got so many eyeballing me like a Nintendog that's pouring at their 10-year empty food bowl. Some games just get the short end of the stick. I'd love to have time for them, but my 600th hour of Apex is calling to me. I want to expand my horizons though. Any new game gives you a wider appreciation of the things that you do like, even if you end up concluding that you had a shit time. There's a lot of games that I end up playing that find their way as background footage to larger discussions that might never work their way towards a larger independent video, but I still want a way to give you a taste of some of the things that I've been playing, even if they don't serve a wider purpose. So while I've got bigger videos in the works, how about we clear out some of the backlog in a fashion that has no analysis and is also extremely steeped in uninformed opinions. Sound good? Good. I've got an oddly similar relationship to Bioshock 1 as I do with my dad. I always remember him fondly, but every time I see him again, he's always managed to gain a new negative trait. It's kind of putting me off replaying it. So when I looked at Bioshock 2 and I went, I don't remember a thing about you. I was hoping it would be a fresh start to the franchise, untainted by nostalgia. And it was in some sense. While I remember the multiplayer, I couldn't have told you a single thing about the campaign, so without any bias to cloud my opinion, I can firmly say, this game's shit. If you've never played Bioshock, here's a quick rundown. Underwater colony, the political and social infrastructure goes to shit, everyone's addicted to magic, remove the victims of political failure like you're a home secretary without limits. Bit of an oversimplification, you're not there to kill indiscriminately, you're there to kill indiscriminately while the game occasionally tugs at your sleeves to ask if it's wrong to kill little girls. Go from point A to point B while being fed a story that contains interesting pieces about class structures and systems to maintain power, told to you by characters saying, "Hey, why would I backstab you just because my name's Beck McStably?" I think it's safe to say I dragged my way through this 11-hour 5 out of 10, in part because I was insistent on finishing it once I found out I was halfway through, and in another because I wanted to appreciate just how far the FPS mechanically has come. While I'd like to rip into the storytelling of this political thriller that has the execution of a school pantomime, I'm also staring down 7 squiggly grammar errors in this Google Doc, so I feel I'm probably not worthy of condemning the writing here. I'd imagine the world has a scale for its ideas that were difficult to convey inside of a gameplay structure that doesn't let it breathe. Instead, I'd rather point and laugh at that gameplay, which I'm sure to many of you is pretty fun, and I don't want to take that away from you, but to me could only be seen as flat and one-dimensional. The game presents a lot of different tools in the form of weapons and magic hands, and while theoretically this makes for a fun combat sandbox, very few of them can actually be used in inventive ways. The various plasmids have very few ways of interacting to make for unique outcomes. The stuns are stuns, the fire is damage over time, the bees are bees, with their functionality starting and ending at this surface level. The very few other interactions, like using the electricity to stun anyone in a pool or using the fire to damage anyone in a pool of gasoline, get tired pretty fast. Normally you end up running out of new applications for a tool after the first to second time that you've used it. As a result, you're looking for the enemies to make for interesting interactions, but unfortunately they're equally as one-dimensional. Each of the splices is kinda designed like a Doom enemy, in that they're supposed to have their own unique role in a fight, but thanks to their sponge-like health bars, hit-scan weapons, and a lack of major distinctions outside of how much damage they take, it makes every encounter feel like an encore of the last. Maybe this was just a problem of playing on hard where every enemy has an extra chunky health bar, but if the enemies were more distinct from one another and layered in a way that made you have to alternate your approach to each fight, maybe this side of the combat could have held up the lackluster tools. However, the failings of both had me disengaging from the moment-to-moment gameplay while also distracting from a story that could have kept my interest if it was told with a slightly less heavy hand. I'll admit, I really like the idea of the setting, and even though the game is so dark, it still has sections that visually impressed me, but when it's paired with the complex moral quandary of whether or not it's okay to kill an ugly child because they have pocket change, I can't help but be glad that it's off my hard drive so that I can make way for new games. Games like Panko Park is a creature photography collection game. You explore an on-rails environment to take photos of little guys in their natural habitat so that you can take photos of more little guys. If that sounds like a stolen concept, then shut the fuck up. Look at this fella. And him. Gross. Now I'll admit, this game had me from the moment I first laid eyes on it. While I think the aesthetic of "it's cute, but whoa, it's fucked up" is pretty overplayed, vile cryptid turned into a cuddly friend is... I mean, it's still overplayed, but I like it. Fill out a picture book might not be an exciting gameplay prospect, so you might be under the assumption that I was in when I played it that what I liked about it was the aesthetic and the aesthetic alone. While I still think that your enjoyment hinges on if you're taken to the visuals, I just so happened to play another game around the time that also had me smitten to its art style, and despite having a similar appeal, there was a huge amount of variance in how much I enjoyed these two games. You've probably got a couple of questions right now, like, what the fuck is going on? Why are you connecting these games? What is this even called? What? It's called WOWIEEEEEE, which is admittedly more abstract on the surface, but ultimately is a creature collection game about solving the puzzles in each area to get more little guys. In the first 10 minutes, I was charmed by the simple character designs, waiting for the game to feed me the hook. And 3 hours later, the credits rolled and I was still waiting. I left Panko Park's 3-hour runtime satisfied, even hungry enough to go back and try fiddling with a bunch of the stuff that I'd missed. That's not to say that I think WOWIEEEEEE wasted my time. I respect it for being abstract, but the real value that I got out of it was giving me clarity on why I liked Panko Park as much as I did. Both games have a very similar cycle. Mechanically, they're very different, but on the larger scale, they're both games where you're tasked with finding a gremlin, getting something from them, and then using that to allow you to go on and find more gremlins. This puts the gremlins at the center of both games. If you don't like getting new guys, then you don't like the game. While Panko Park does this extremely well, using its creatures to create intrigue and goals, WOWIEEEEEE doesn't use its creatures for, well, anything. In WOWIEEEEEE, you get a new guy, they have a request, and then you complete that request with one of the guys that you already have. Repeat that until the end of the game. The progression of this is very linear, which wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't so predictable, while also coming across as directionless. With a game that's so limited in its scope, getting new guys should feel like an event, and even though it's presented as such, the game never takes the time to set up making the act of getting new guys fun. Panko Park, on the other hand, uses the on-rail experience to make the act of finding things its own entertainment. At the beginning of the game, you're limited to exclusively taking photos, but that limitation is used to set up anticipation. You snap a photo and you get your photo, whatever, but you also get all of these other markers to show you that you've missed something. It gives you an indication of what it might be that you're looking for, but it doesn't tell you how you should look for it. It lets you consider how you might be able to get that photo, which creates intrigue. So when you finally do reach that goal, you have the build-up in the back of your mind that becomes a payoff later. Further reinforced after a level with the picture book that not only celebrates how much you saw, but also shows you just how much you missed, driving you to jump back into a level and making you giddy to find stuff. And it's not just photos. There's a bunch of rocks in the environment that don't go explained, but clearly have a mechanical purpose that gets solved later, letting you wonder what's behind it in the meantime. You're given a ball to throw at creatures, but not everything reacts in predictable ways. There's secrets and easy to miss interactions. It's not just that you get to take pictures of Bungler. Buy my Bungler plush, this is now a mainstay character. It's that the game sets up mechanical questions that you find the answers to, and your reward for putting those pieces together is Bungler. All of this creates a flow that makes the act of getting new things fun. As a result, Panko Park's imagery is stuck with me even after I've put the game down. WOWIEEEEEE has pencils with eyes, and I still like the look of WOWIEEEEEE. It's very charming. Yes, I would consider an inanimate object with a face as charm. That's why you're so charming. But in the moment, that quality was lost on me, since I was, unfortunately, pretty bored. Maybe WOWIEEEEE just wasn't for me. Maybe it's a good game that I just don't appreciate. But in my opinion, these games show the yin to yang of making a successful, aesthetically driven game. You can still make a game that draws people in with its visuals, but that can't be everything. The gameplay doesn't have to be conventional or complex, but it should still have some kind of purpose to justify somebody playing your game instead of watching it. Good news everyone, I've officially reached the point in my life where I'm nostalgic for games I've never played. I've got a little soft spot for the Gamecube. The most important game to me is on that bitch, while also housing a lot of the best versions of many of my childhood games. Like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, don't play 4 and I'm gonna kill Bam Margera. That's also led me to jumping the gun on just assuming games for the console are good. Pikmin 1 is goated, probably. After all, it's on the Gamecube, and Pikmin 2, a game that I've actually played, is actually goated. One of the habits that I want to kick though is thinking that a game is good if one of the games in the franchise is alright. That must mean that all of them are just great. So I thought I'd start smashing that habitual wall down with Pikmin, and lo and behold, I was actually right. This game is goated. The first-person shooter was esoteric enough to warrant an explanation, but I'm gonna assume that the enslaving carrots for Duracell's game universally understood. Pikmin is easily one of the best games on the Gamecube. While that might not seem like high praise for a console that has like 7 games, boy howdy, those 7 good fucking games. For the first entry into a genre that was at its height on a system that wasn't designed for it, Pikmin gets a lot right that I still haven't seen replicated elsewhere. I tend to bounce off of every RTS single player I try, mainly because I can't shake the feeling that I'm playing it wrong. Even after successfully completing a mission, it feels like I've done it too slowly, or that the game was trying to teach me something that I didn't learn, or worst of all, that I was just bored. Pikmin, on the other hand, is great from start to finish, even if it does stumble over the balcony of quality for its final boss. A big part of that is how Pikmin shifts the focus from being about combat with enemies to traversing and exploring the environment. Fighting Bulborbs by itself is boring, mechanically dull and strategically flimsy, but once they're gone, the permanence of your actions makes that engagement fulfilling. Since the actual task at hand is finding and retrieving your ship parts, everything that might lead to making that experience safer or faster in the future has a long-term payoff. Even if it feels like I've played slowly on one day, the permanent effects of that day mean that I don't care. I've already made tomorrow faster, and that feeling of constant progress never lets me stumble into the thought that I might be playing wrong. From there, a lot of the satisfaction is derived in the same way as something like Power Washing Simulator, or Panko Park. That chipping away at a job and knowing that with every part collected, you're closer to the end. You know, while a lot of good games have been made off of the kind of bursty joys that we associate with most games, it's this kind of large-scale fulfillment that has made both of the Pikmins stick with people even after all these years. It's a bit of a shame then that during my entire playthrough, my mind was snagging against the Pikmin 2 comparison, like a single vertice that just isn't rigged correctly. Pikmin 2 basically invalidates playing the original. It keeps all of the qualities of the first game, including half the levels, and amplifies them 20 times over. The enemies are more fun to fight, the color palette is far more whimsical, and instead of just getting this feeling that I'm a little guy, now I am a little guy. The further hunt for real-world objects gives the game a much more palpable tone. In 2, you're a little fella on a big adventure. Real chibi robo vibes. In 1, you're frumpy. Oh man. Existential crisis. I mean, it's kinda silly, I guess, but like, the vibes are all off. But Pikmin original still deserves to be loved. Maybe it's not as refined or colorful, and it doesn't have Louis, but for everything that it lacks, it holds a quality that I personally don't think has ever been replicated. In Pikmin 1, with every wall broken or bridge expanded, there's a very unique feeling. It's the knowledge of progress, yeah, but there's something more there. Since you spend all your time in these levels, there's something very liberating about removing the barriers between you and where you want to be. 2 still kinda has that, but it's used in a much more traditional way of gating you out of areas. Because 2 approaches the game with holes, mini-dungeons that you spend most of your time in that are mostly linear, breaking down these minor barriers when they are used to make travel easier doesn't feel the same. It would be nice if I could find a word for it that wasn't just a synonym for shortcut good, but it's a feeling that's very distinct when you spend all of your time in one wider space. Maybe I can try and show you by example. You know this ladder? It's that feeling. Just instead of its use here where it's like a relief from tension, it's like excitement for the places you can go now. Shortcut good. While 2 amplifies almost every quality of Pikmin 1, this is a part of the game that I feel got pushed down and largely forgotten about in favour of more compartmentalised level design. I'd really like to see another game come along and try to recreate that unique quality that's present here. And if there's one that's already done that, please tell me, because I need more of whatever this feeling is in my life. I've lost the patience to edit this video, so it's time for a lightning round!
Lovely Planet Remix.
Did you know there's like 3 of these games? I'm serious! Just like being drawn to the brightly packaged candy, this game is sweet, quick, and after too much of it, body parts start to hurt. Just instead of your tummy, it's crippling RSI.
Thumper.
Everyone I know really likes this game, and I think it's good, but would you like if I paced my entire video like this? No, it'd be shit. So I didn't like this game until about level 6, when they stopped feeding me their sentences like it wasn't the only language I knew. This game is about music.
Doom 3.
It's shit, BFG edition or not. Stop pretending it's good.
Before Your Eyes.
Not technically in the backlog, but I have to talk about it somewhere. I was starting to worry that I'd unknowingly suffered some illness that took away my ability to cry for the last 4 years. Then I booted up this expecting to go, oh, that was sad. 2 hours later, I was a blubbering mess. If you're looking for something extremely untraditional and haven't had to sell your soul to keep the heating bill up, give this a go. It was better than Elden Ring.
Rock of Ages.
I can hardly tell you what I liked about it, but I thought it was nice. A great little game to turn your brain off to for a couple of hours. There's also 3 of these, but the packaging isn't as bright and I started to get sick of the taste by the time I'd finished it, so sorry.
Tory 3D.
Sir Desmond Swain, MP for the British Tory party, once described blackface as an entirely acceptable bit of fun. Very unfortunately titled game.
Devil May Cry 3.
I've tried to get into this game 4 times. This time, I finished it. And I hated it. I don't want to be a I couldn't get over the jank guy, because I can normally, but the camera was horrible, and the environments were horrible, and I just hated it. Alright, I think that's enough for today. I'm all gamed out. What have we learned today? Nothing. We've learnt nothing.